If city clerk will note attendance, we'll move on with the agenda approval. Are there any revisions or alterations to the agenda? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and assume the agenda as approved and proceed on with it. You just took it away from me. No, I got it right here. That's all right. Let's move on to public comments. Again, we won't be taking online or any individuals within the room here wishing to make comments before the committee. And for those who may be online, you can submit the comments through email and the council will get them. Seeing no hands being raised, we'll go ahead and move on to approval of minutes dated April 16th, 2024. Are there any comments or revisions in regards to the minutes as presented? Okay, unless there are objections, we'll accept them as approved. Minutes are approved. We'll move on to consideration of claims reported dated May 13th, 2024. At this time, the chair has received no questions or queries in email. As per some process we put together some time ago. And chair has no questions. Are there any questions from the committee in regards to the claims report? Okay. Any objections to moving the claims report forward for approval by council? All right. We'll go ahead.
Consent.
Oh, go ahead.
On consent.
On consent. All right, so no agenda bills. We'll move on to discussion, review proposed update to the financial policies.
All right, so good evening, council. Good to be here today. Summer's almost around the corner. I'm sure we're all looking forward to that. But before that, I'm going to bore you everyone with financial policy. So with that said, maybe this will get a bit exciting over time, but it is actually really, really critical because it does set the table for the budget conversation and the CIP conversation that we're going to have. So the elements that we've been most focused on during this, the work that we put into this financial policy update recently has been the budget section as well as the CIP section. And you'll kind of see that in here. Just to start off with some background, a complete revision of the city's financial management policy took place over multiple months in 2022. It was developed concurrently at the time with the 23-24 biennial budget. And it really at that time had been a decade since the last update. It really did borrow heavily from the Issaquah's financial management policy, their own, primarily because Jen Ferguson came to us from the city of Issaquah as well as the city of Stanwood. And we've had 2 years at this point to put the financial management policy into practice. And what we've experienced is some of the updates that we're going to share with you is, from that experience over the past couple of years, we're going to propose some potential changes. It's normal for cities to review and update the financial management policy every 2 years. Prior to the development of the next biennial budget. So this is actually the proper point in time in which we were to conduct this. And the city's financial management policy provides guidance for financial decision-making and procedures largely cover the detailed steps necessary to carry out the policies that we have in here. So with that said, really looking forward. There you go. Purpose of this review and update is to clean up and or clarify the financial management policy to ensure that it's working for us and or reflecting our current circumstances. So over the duration of time before we actually update this, I'm hoping to get council's feedback on the things that we're proposing for an update in regards to the financial management policy, but also there may be some things that you see that we should also update in here, and we can have that conversation as we kind of move forward through this process. The policy also provides a good reminder for everyone, or this update provides a good reminder for everyone of what the financial management policy states. And if we wanted to really engage in a longer cleanup effort, then I would say let's hold off until the off budget year to really focus on that. And so right now, this is just kind of a quick kind of sort of cleanup effort that we're going through right now so that we can get ourselves in alignment to have that budget conversation as well as that CIP conversation. A lot of the management policy itself helps to set, like I said, the table for us. It helps to give Jana clarity for what she needs to do and how she's gonna create that budget or work to create that budget for us overall. And so it is really critical that we do go through this. With that said, the first section I'm gonna have everyone focus on is 2.0, which is the reserves and fund balance section. We have a number of different fund types across the city, such as the general fund, which you categorize as governmental operating. There's also managerial funds within governmental operating, special revenue funds within governmental operating. And then there's other things such as governmental capital, which typically addresses the non-utilities capital fund, enterprise funds, which are largely our utility funds. And then there are also internal service funds that we have here at the city. Right now, current policy really only focuses on roughly 2 of those different fund types, really the general fund and the reserve fund, where it states that we need to reserve annually roughly 15 to 20% of our ongoing general fund expenditures. And then likewise with the enterprise utilities, your water, sewer, and stormwater operating funds, as well as the utilities capital fund, kind of what we have to do in order to maintain a decent and healthy reserve for the city within those funds. But it doesn't quite cover every fund type that we have. And part of the complexity that we deal with in budget is, okay, what's an actual amount that we should set aside in terms of or reserves for all the other funds that we operate here at the city? So what we're proposing as a part of this is to actually, we hope to, with the general fund or the reserve fund, to maintain the same reserve target. So 15 to 20% of annual ongoing general fund expenditures. But then also we'd like to set up for a reserve target for the managerial funds, such as your arts activity fund, roughly equal to 15 to 20% of annual operating expenditures. For your special revenue funds, such as the lodging tax fund, which primarily is used for tourism promotion with the community, roughly 15 to 20% of annual operating expenditures. In terms of our non-utilities capital fund, which is something that you're going to see as a part of your CIP that you have in front of you, we're suggesting to reserve up to 1.5 times of total annual debt service. For the enterprise funds, we're largely keeping that consistent with what the current policy states, but we're proposing an update to our total annual debt service coverage, changing that from 1.25 times to 1.5 times. And then in addition to that, we need to come up with a reserve policy and really a reserve target for our internal service funds, which includes IT, facilities maintenance, and ER&R. And we're proposing that at 15 to 20% of annual operating expenditures, plus an amount that adequately accounts for the city's asset replacement schedules as well. And I think from our history here previously, we've had conversations about what that kind of depreciation mechanism kind of looks like overall. And that will help us to guide us into the future if we were to set these policies. So with that said, Chair, I do see a hand raised.
Go ahead, Karen.
I did just have a quick question. So if in the event that we go forward with this, would the reserve balance then be kind of phased in, or would it be dropped in? At
So
the
we think
outset?
right now we can cover
Okay.
all of these at this point. So I don't think we necessarily have to phase it in, but that is a good point to make. And there are other sections as part of the policy as well about how to get back up to
Okay.
your reserve target overall. So or to just call your attention to really page 6, there is the replenishment of reserve section overall, 2.7. Now in your red line version, should assigned fund balance or reserve targets fall below stated thresholds, the city will strive towards regaining the minimum threshold and forecast the timing of the unassigned fund balance improvement within a long-term financial model. So in essence, what that is implicating is we need to come up with a plan at that stage and actually present it to council about how we get our reserve targets back up to the minimum threshold that this would set.
So, are you okay?
Yeah.
What, governmental operating managerial funds, where before you said current policy was none, you're proposing 15% of annual operating expenditures. Slightly confused by by your intro of this. Is that total annual operating expenditure, or are there special funds you're specifically talking about in regards to that?
So within each managerial fund, not the total managerial funds, but each specific managerial fund, we should be setting aside 15 to 20% of our total annual operating expenditures within fund balance.
And on those conditions where we would need that, where was that money before?
Well, it was unallocated fund balance, basically. wasn't allocated to reserves. It was in essence collecting as fund balance inside the fund.
Okay, so about how much money we're talking about there?
Um, so I don't have figures with me. So when it comes to the Arts Activity Fund, you're probably looking at roughly about $10,000
Yeah.
in total. The other managerial fund is the North Bend Police Services Fund. And so, if you're looking at roughly $1.8 million in total operating expenditures per year, which just pulling figures off in my head, you're looking probably 360,000, and right now we've got probably about 130. So
Okay, and those are the two managerial
those are
funds.
really the two managerial funds that.
Okay.
Mhm.
And government operating special revenue funds? How much, kind of what is that?
So your special revenue funds would includes funds such as the hotel motel tax fund. So total expenditures, I would say roughly about $150,000. So, 20% of that would be about $30,000 or so. We certainly do have that coverage. In terms of the drug enforcement fund, we've currently appropriate, so we've been appropriating, or at least for 2024, we've got $5,000 appropriated for that. So, and certainly we've got about $40,000 in that fund itself. So there's 15 to 20% there that we'll be able to cover. The opioid settlement fund, that is another kind of special revenue fund because we are collecting settlement funds from another number of different pharmaceutical companies for the most part. And so that is evolving. So I'm assuming our expenditures will likely change over time when it comes to that fund. And then we also have the affordable housing fund as well, which is a special revenue fund that collects the 0.1% affordable housing sales tax, as well as the sales tax credit from the state. Regardless of that, right now, we don't have anything appropriated for 2024. And so, a 15 to 20% target of nothing appropriated spent necessarily is zero.
So I guess I'm partially confused of holding back a percentage of those versus they, by nature of the revenue source, that those monies are restricted. It can't spend affordable housing on
You can't, no.
irrigation coffins. Okay, so I you may need to help me with why do the funds are already restricted for their use. We should make use of them. It's not typically something that we're going to see impacted by either events or by what others, so our cessation of business or whatever. So
Well, so what I would suggest is we don't have an housing action plan in front of you, right, necessarily. Over time, council's going to figure out what that kind of looks like. As a part of those expenses that come from the Affordable Housing Fund, there could be some operating expenses, right, that over time the city's going to carry. More so than just any sort of capital improvements might come from this.
Right.
So consequently, having a policy in place when we do reach that stage could be very beneficial in understanding how much money we should set aside. Just for example, we went through a massive increase in inflation right over time. I'm sure that impacted the affordable housing sector. If we are engaged in any sort of affordable housing activities, we might see our expenses over time increase, and we'll have to make sure to increase the reserve levels, or at least maybe utilize that reserve that we've set aside with that fund in order to support those potential inflationary increases that might happen over time, and then find a way to, as we've discussed, replenish those reserves and get us back up to a normal level. So there could be certainly a use for this policy in place when we do reach that stage to where we know what we're going to do with our affordable housing funds.
okay. Go ahead, Councilman Johnson.
Thank you. Yeah, so, but when I don't understand something in financial policies, I like to try to state what I think it is and then have you correct me about what I got wrong, which is probably all of it. So here's what I'm currently understanding is the managerial fund, and please correct me for all the things I'm about to say that are wrong. So the idea is that for these managerial funds that we would have them for, let's say, police, fire, something like that. and we may not have them right now. But we would establish those. Currently, what we have instead is we have, let's say for fire, we have a certain amount that is appropriated for fire. And we don't necessarily spend all of that. That goes into fund balance, and some portion of that goes into reserve. And that's not all of it does. Some of it maybe rolls over. So that extra amount is being proposed as being a new thing for some of the categories of the budget that don't currently have a managerial fund. We would establish one, and first, what did I get wrong there? And then I'll have a follow-up.
So let me see if hopefully I can unpack it. So we already have managerial funds established.
Okay.
So there is no creation of a new managerial fund through this, which means there's already these funds in place that are where we are collecting revenue and we're counting our expenditures against that revenue. And we're finding that our revenues are actually exceeding our expenditures within those funds, right? What we could do right now is if we don't have any reserve, we could actually draw down within our appropriation limit, that fund balance all the way to zero. But if your fund balance is at zero and yet there's all these exogenous events that might take place over the next year, you might find yourself in trouble where now you're going to have to pull money in from the general fund in order to support that fund itself. So all we're really asking for is to kind of set what that target, that reserve target is, so that we are having some sort of cushion in case some of these unexpected events, if there's any sort of economic issue that might arise, such as inflationary pressures and that we have some sort of measure of protection within the fund. That's not just the general fund, but within across all the funds for the most part, so that we can make sure that we're not, having to pull from different areas in order to just make sure that we're not in a deficit within that one particular fund.
Okay, so then revising what I now think that I'm seeing or understanding is that you've got the reserve that in a perfect world you never touch. You have the fund balance that you may have some extra that's left over at the end of the budget cycle, and that apart from those two things, there's already a managerial fund, but that there's more room for the managerial fund because we are not actually going all the way to zero. And the purpose of this is to say, well, why don't we just set the 0 point a little bit higher? And then if we do end up going past the 0 point, we don't have to go into reserve. It's like a reserve.
Okay.
Does that sound right? Does that
I
sound
see
right?
I see where you're going. Yeah. I think
So-
what you said makes sense in a weird way, but
Yeah,
it makes
so it's like a
sense.
fail
Yeah.
safe in a way.
It is. It's, Al Gore used to say the lockbox, right? So
Yeah.
we're taking some of this, the money that we have across these managerial funds, and we're going to put that away into a lockbox just in case there's a problem that might arise in the future, so that we don't want someone coming in, in our house for the most part and actually taking that money and using it for something and not having any sort of protection or that lockbox available to us when something bad does happen. So it's a measure of protection for our overall financial health to have that in place. And it's common. It's what we do with the general fund. It's what we do. We've got a separate reserve fund actually there to support the general fund in case there are those consequences or exogenous events that do happen over time. It's something for us to draw upon. I think we were close to probably drawing upon that during the pandemic for the most part, just because we had these massive decreases in revenue forecasted, I think overall. Luckily, we never really experienced that much of a drop, right? But it was in place in case we needed to dive into that in order to help us figure out what we're going to do next. So we just want to make sure that that same sort of situation that we've set up for the general fund is also the same thing that we would do across all the other funds.
You had another question, Karen?
Yeah, but I may need 2 minutes to get there. And all the red lines, sorry.
Okay.
One quick thing.
All right, go ahead.
Real quick, is there an important or significant difference between the terms operating and ongoing? Because I see them used sometimes interchangeably and sometimes not. So I just want to make sure that I know that if there is a difference between operating and ongoing. what it
Yeah.
is.
No, that's a good catch. So for us, the general fund is really important to make sure that we're sustainable over time. And our definition of sustainability has been whether or not our ongoing revenues are exceed our ongoing expenditures over time. And we presented that as a part of the financial forecast. Operating expenses could include ongoing expenditures or ongoing operating expenditures as well as one-time operating expenditures. So it is a bit more open in that regard, not as protective as the definition would be for the general fund overall. But I think that's a good point to bring up is indeed there is a different, in my estimation, a different definition for ongoing versus operating.
So when I see those in here, I should take them to mean a specific thing,
Yes.
not to be interchangeable.
Mhm. Sure. I think the
Good.
mayor.
No, go ahead. Me had the same question I have.
Okay, go ahead. She.
Well, no, the mer, you can go.
All right, go ahead.
So first of all, are there going to be definitions? So you're talking about managerial funds. So what would actually would fall under managerial fund? Would be one.
Yeah, we could certainly add definitions to this. This is best I could do in the couple days that I
Yes.
spent. So, but no, I think it would be handy to have definitions of the different fund types. Yes.
And then aren't there requirements for how much you're supposed to have on in reserve for debt service? And so is the 1.5 times, is that what the normal
Our
is?
bond covenants, for example, our
Right.
revenue bond actually doesn't require us to set money aside for that, primarily because we have an insurance policy. We bought an insurance policy that we paid at that time in order to be able to provide us with the debt coverage that we need. So it's not necessarily having a reserve set aside for the bond itself, but there could be insurance policies and things in place that we've already prepaid or situations like that where it's not required for us to set aside money for that because we've got that in place.
Councilman Christensen.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. So some of the red lines that have gone on here, I saw that you took off, and this is the page 4. It's 2.2.22.01 reserve fund. I know that in order to use the reserves as currently written, they needed to have approval by the city council. Would the proposal then be if we're adding the 3 additional reserve funds, would that also be, their use would be in order to use them, it would require city council approval as well on the
So,
other
in
reserves?
essence, yes, and we are not appropriating for reserves or to utilize those reserves. So likely what's going to happen is a budget amendment's going to come forward to actually draw upon those reserves. So you know, it's already the practice for us to come back.
Mhm.
Maybe it's not addressed specifically in here, but the budget amendment process would require us to come back and actually address that with council.
I'd rather you elaborate on it than take it out.
So it's been moved, it was moved from down here to up here. I just want to make sure that to the extent that we end up going forward with the additional reserves, that those would also require
Yes.
city council approval before dipping into the reserves, assuming we go forward with that. And then just so that I understand, so when we have the reserves in the account, is there anything that's going to be handled differently with them other than just not touching them? Like, for example, for those types of funds, are they being invested and earning interest and things like that? Will
Yes.
that handling change?
So they are being invested and we are generating interest off that.
Mhm.
So, in essence, we'd still be following the same policy. Whatever interest is generated off that, if it's more than what we had anticipated and can cover whatever we need to in order to reach 15 to 20%, anything in excess of that could be used for other expenses that we may have. So it doesn't have to go. Okay.
It's- they wondered.
So then on enterprise utility funds. So, debt service reserves, bond covenants, or was 1.25 and you're going to 1.5. Why?
Well, primarily to stay consistent with what we're proposing for the non-utilities capital fund or governmental capital. So I'd like to apply it to both places for the most part. It is a bit more of a stringent requirement, I think, overall. And what that does, it will increase the fund balance that we have to carry from year to year. Primarily when you're looking at bond payments, you're looking at 2 payments per year. You're looking at a payment largely in June, as well as a payment within December. The December payment typically includes the principal plus half the interest, and the June payment usually includes just half the interest. So 1.5 times will largely get you through 1.5 years of debt service if you need to, for you to be able to figure out a plan what to do. I'm a little bit worried that 1.25 might get you through 1 year, but maybe not through 1.5 years. And so if we wanted that additional kind of 6 months in order to figure out what are we going to do if, we can't afford to pay, right, the bond, then that gives us just a little bit more cushion to help us through that.
So any money we put in reserve is money not being used. In essence, we're holding it just in case. I'm not sure I'm with you on this threshold as I don't know that we've had the issue of worried about being able to pay the bond back. Pandemic notwithstanding, but again, we did things to deal with a pandemic, which I don't want to go through again. But just cause I need a little more than just cause to change these numbers. I do some logic went into setting that original target. And again, any money we hold in reserve is not money being utilized for whatever the purpose is. So maybe
In some cases.
help me with that one.
Some of the
Okay.
value, right, overall, it's if you were to go to S&P, which is our bond rating agency, they're gonna look at our reserve levels overall and see if we're prepared to set enough aside, which could help us actually to upgrade our bond rating. So, we're right now, I think, at AA+ when it comes to S&P on a revenue bond side for the most part. This could potentially help us to elevate that up to AAA in case we need to go out for another bond in the future. And, whatever happens in regards to the utilities portion of the CIP that's going to come forward, there could potentially be some debt as a part of that overall conversation. This will put us into place to ideally achieve that and reduce or lower our interest rate over time. So I get it. We don't want to hoard money necessarily. I think I've been over time, we've heard that the finance department needs to be accurate, not necessarily conservative. And that's our goal. And that's the intention of what I want to do with our finance department here. This may seem a little conservative, I think overall, but I want to make sure that we're healthy in case we do have any of these events come through that we're challenged, or if we're challenged, that we have the money that we have that we need in order to support us through that time. So.
Additional questions? And are you looking for us to say,
So what I would say is council can think about it. The discussion that we've had today overall, you can certainly send your questions to me after the fact, and we can kind of continue that conversation when I come back in the next one, which would be right now, probably May the 21st. You can certainly give me your thumbs up then if you want to, or you may have some further questions and require some further refinement. Right now, that's what we have on the budget development calendar is May the 21st, coming back to the FNA, and then ideally an adoption on June. But obviously we can update the calendar depending on how long you'd like to spend with the policies.
all right, but homework to us to go ahead and
Take a look at
read
that.
this thoroughly and give feedback, and we'll have a
It's
discussion
not
again
perfect,
next week.
and so you guys provide very, very valuable feedback to this and help us to really build a better product. And then ideally that will roll right directly into the budget and help us to really build a better budget overall.
One thing I am looking for is in the, not the top one, but the new ones where we had none before. What are they? How much is it? What are the managerial funds? How much are they? And how much are we talking about putting in reserve?
Okay.
That for that, the operating revenue and, sorry, I can't. Either that's too far or this is too close, but my eyeballs can't do it. And government capital, again, how much we're talking about? Okay,
What funds and how much?
Yeah.
All right. So with that said, moving on to the next one, 3.0 revenues. And really what I'm trying to go through here is really the substantive changes. There's going to be a lot of kind of, you know, grammatical changes, I think, overall. So really I'm trying to get you guys through the substantive changes through this presentation. In terms of revenues right here, 3.1.2 states that the utility rate studies will be conducted periodically and should divide costs equitably amongst customer classes per benefit and cost of service. If rates are set that subsidize one class or customer at the expense of another, this action should be taken in support of explicit city policy. And what I've added right now, or a plan should be put into place to bring customer classes back into alignment with the respective cost of service. The goal was to actually reflect current practice. For our conversations regarding the utility rate study in the past, we've set, you know, basically a 10-year period in which we intend to get back to cost of service for each customer class over time, which is why the rates are different for if you're a residential class, your rates are different than if you're a member of the high commercial class and so on. In addition to that, we also subtracted out the last line after that because of the vital importance of water, sewer, stormwater as public services, which are heavily impacted by federal and state regulations. The city will strive to provide a minimum cost alternative to all utility customers. We weren't quite sure what the intent of that sentence was necessarily, and so we thought it would be wise to strike that just because we're not sure how to interpret that or what that necessarily meant. And so really that is the one large and substantive update to the revenue section. In terms of the expenditure section 4.0, expenditures and procurement, in regards to the purchasing contract commitments threshold. So what you've got on page 11 is a table, and that is our purchasing and contract commitment thresholds overall. This table is actually really critical, and the staff utilizes this table pretty heavily in terms of determining who they should go to obtain approval for any sort of contracts to move forward. And it tells us at what level do we need to bring something to council? What level could the mayor sign for it and so on? In addition, there's procedural requirements for each dollar limit as a part of that table overall. Our struggle here at the city, however, is what was approved as a part of the financial management policy in the past doesn't necessarily reflect what's in the municipal code today. And so there's a discrepancy there that we need to fix. In particular, contract amendments. And the Snoqualmie Municipal Code, it's set at $35,000. In the current financial management policy, it's set at $50,000 required for council approval, as well as for change orders. So for change order, if you have anything above $35,000, you need to bring it to council. That's in the municipal code. However, the financial management policy states that if it's $50,000 or greater, you'd have to bring it back to council for approval if it's a change order. So we just want to reconcile those two together. We'd recommend $50,000 to council, just because that is what council voted in the past in terms of adopting the financial management policy. The problem back then is we never actually updated the municipal code through an ordinance, basically to have it reflect what this table looks like, or to actually maybe remove it from the municipal code and cite the financial management policy within section 2.90 of the municipal code. So
Why not do it the other way? Remove it out of here, reference the municipal code.
right.
You went first last time, you go first this time.
For the resolution that we already passed, doesn't the city already have the authorization to go ahead and update the existing provisions of the municipal code under section 3?
So I'd probably have to ask the city attorney, but because it's a resolution, I'm not quite sure. In my impression, in order to update the municipal code, you require an ordinance to do so,
Yeah.
but I could be wrong.
Okay. It's just. Okay. Take a look at section 3, because it looks like it says the mayor and administration are requested to prepare and present to council for adoption the ordinance repealing or amending any existing provisions of the SMC that are in conflict with the comprehensive financial management policy adopted herein.
Right, so they would bring an agenda bill with revising the SM through ordinance. Okay,
Yep.
I think you're vehemently agreeing.
Yes.
Go
I
ahead,
just,
Justin.
Just saying that, I think it'd be awkward if, it stopped at 50,000 in here and didn't say, well, what do we do if it's over 50,000? So between the two options, I prefer to amend the municipal code rather than remove the line here. I like this as a really nice splash page to be like, oh, okay, over 50,000, cool. And then I'd have to look into different points depending on the number for what I'm supposed to do.
Right, and I think Drew's the same way. One should reference the other and it should be taken out of one. So
Yeah.
there's just one source of truth here. And no matter what, we gotta go revise the municipal code either to take it out or change it to match what we did in policy. So I would say take it out of here, reference the municipal code and bring an agenda bill for revision.
Okay.
Councilor Christensen?
Sorry, I have one more. And then for the for the matrix that we have right now and the approvals and the dollar limit based on inflation and everything else, is that working now for city staff or is there going to be a different recommendation? And we're really talking about a third number that would be necessary here.
At this time, we haven't had any conversations about that internally at this point, but I think you do bring up a very good point that due to our inflationary increases, maybe there is a review of these thresholds that we should have overall.
So we're going to go in and change it now. We may want to
Mhm.
go what's necessary.
Mayor?
Right, so if you do resolution, it's easier to change than you're continually changing the municipal code, which would be an ordinance then.
Right.
Right? So so do you want him to remove it from the resolution or you want him to remove it from the municipal code?
I would remove it
Reference
from the financial policies and reference the municipal code and bring an ordinance for revision of the municipal code.
Right, so the point was that with inflation and everything else that's happening, anytime you want to change any type of threshold, now you have to change municipal code instead of a resolution, which here it's easy. Let's see what the financial policies are now, and you have your contract information there. And this is all in one place. Than trying to find it in the municipal code, and you have to change it every time inflation and other things happen.
Two things. One, I'd prefer it in the SMC, just personal preference. Two, I'm not in favor of changing the thresholds at this stage.
But it could be in the future.
Discussions can always occur. I mean, I didn't say don't come with it. I just said, I'm your guy. Well, I'm not there. All right. You okay? City Administrator, your hand up?
Since Councilperson Christensen went there, I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit to 4.5. I can tell you that the current municipal code limit of $2,000 on the purchasing card is debilitating for the city. People are running around this building going, do you have any room left on your card or this card or that card? I would strongly encourage us to follow what we set forth and get that fixed.
And where was that?
4.5.2 at the bottom.
Oh, okay. All right, propose, when we come back with the ordinance change, propose a change, let's have a discussion.
That's exactly what I was gonna say.
All right.
I think, but you weren't necessarily set on it. I mean, I'd like to have further discussion then about whether it's a municipal code or a resolution. Because it's a lot of work to continue to change ordinance and it takes a lot of time to do that versus the resolution.
I stated my opinion, I prefer it in SMC. And I don't view a difficulty in changing it as bad. It should be something we consider when we do it. We always have had rather lengthy discussions around this every time we do it. Councilman Johnson?
Again, I do like having the table all in one spot, so for whatever the limit is, I know exactly where to find it. Having the limit to where it goes to council being in a different spot than the rest of the table feels clunky. Alternatively, you could take the whole table out here and put the whole table into the code. And then we'd have to update all of those things via ordinance. But regardless, I want it all in one spot. I wouldn't want to have the council approval be in a different spot from the other kinds of approvals.
Okay.
As far as ordinance versus resolution, I'll have to think about that.
It should be one place or the other and
Yes.
referenced.
All of it should be in one spot or the other. I'll have to think about which one.
Right, so you're including all financial policies would be in one
No,
spot.
No.
just the table.
Just,
Just,
just the table and the requirement that says well, that's a reserve issue you talked about, that if you go over into the reserve, it requires council.
no, the $50,000 limit. Here it is.
Oh, well, anytime, anything that breaches the limit comes to council. And if it needs to be stated in the ordinance, it can be stated in the ordinance as such.
So this table that has all the different limits,
Yep.
I'm saying I want this all in one place. So I
Yes.
don't have to hunt back.
I think we're all in agreement.
Okay.
Well, the item for discussion and consideration is, where's that one place?
Which is great in the financial policies.
Understand your position.
Okay, all right. So section 5.0 budget. 5.3 states the city will adopt budgets for all funds, and I've added functional classifications and capital programs and projects as established by council. And struck out except for the general fund, which we budgeted at the functional classification level on that basis. In essence, the goal is to really just give council the ability on a biennium basis to determine exactly where they're gonna set the appropriation thresholds overall. Whether we have a general fund that includes functional classifications or not, that will be determined this year as well. And we don't necessarily want to tie ourselves down a little too much in regards to that. When you also see here is capital programs and projects as established by council, we're gonna kind of have a bit of a brief conversation on that and what that may look like. I think we're interested probably as a council, as well as the administration, to actually move forward to having continuing appropriations in regards to capital projects. And so with that said, that's going to look a bit different in terms of the budget ordinances that we'll be providing to council at the end of the year, I think overall, but will ideally benefit us in total. Because I know that there's a lot of confusion about budgeting projects within a 2-year window, when there's a project budget that may expand 6 years, and what does it all mean collectively together and how that all works. And so I think a way to actually see through this, the complexity that we often deal with, is to actually move towards a continuing appropriation process overall when it comes to our capital project and program budgets. So with that said, we also have an addition here in terms of section 5.6.2, personnel adjustments. In essence, the administration is requesting some clarity when it comes to the ability to make adjustments for personnel within the city overall. What I've stated here is any personnel adjustment that increases the city ongoing expenditures relative to ongoing revenue and changes service levels as established by council requires legislative approval. And the second sentence after that is any personnel adjustment that does not lead to an increase in ongoing expenditures relative to ongoing revenue nor changes service levels can be executed by the administration without legislative approval. Often you have departments within the city that unless they bring an agenda bill to council, can't reorg in order to meet some of the demands of their job and their departments. As a finance department, I'm unable to take one position in the department and convert it into another position within the department without having to come back to council for approval. And we should be allowed, in my estimation, as a department head, to be able to make that adjustment so long as I'm not increasing our ongoing expenditures over time. And so long as I'm meeting the service level needs of the city as well. Anything that increases our expenditures, especially our ongoing expenditures above and beyond our ongoing revenues, and creates more of a financial burden overall here as well as into the future, yes, should come back to council. But if it doesn't accomplish that, and it's actually going to benefit the city overall, and we're going to be able to get more accomplished, we should be able to make that change internally as an administration to help the city move forward more quickly. And so that's why we've got that section in there, basically, is to help with that. Right now, what we currently do, our current practice, which isn't, there's no guidance or any policy in regards to that practice, is to actually bring an agenda bill requesting personnel changes through it, personnel adjustment agenda bill. And, we haven't done that recently at all, but it is a bit of a hassle for us to do that. And so we're requesting this kind of new policy as a part of this, the financial management policies. So with that said, section 6.0, the capital budget, just really adding or updating some definitions, I think overall. To kind of describe the differences between capital outlay versus capital program versus capital project. The primary ones that we'll use internally, especially in regards to CIP, is capital program and capital project. I've defined capital program as the continuous acquisition or renewal over an extended period of time of similar long-term fiscal assets with a useful life greater than 1 year, which is really pretty much a standard accounting definition, especially when you start targeting useful lives and things like that. I also state as a part of this, given its continuous and ongoing nature, capital program retains permanence in this. Shouldn't really see that capital program go away over time. You should see the street resurfacing program over time. You should see the playground replacement program over time. And that should be a consistent element of any sort of CIP that we bring to council. Examples, like I said, include the resurfacing of streets and the replacement of utility mains. In terms of a capital project, my definition is a discrete and one-time acquisition or renewal of a long-term fiscal asset with a useful life greater than 1 year. Given its one-time nature, capital projects will exist for a finite period of time in the CIP, which means once the project's done, you're not going to see that project repeat over and over and over again. If it's going to repeat over and over and over again, it should be a capital program, and it should have some permanence within the CIP. Examples include the acquisition of a fire station or the replacement of a lift station. So just some kind of, when we talk about, describing fund types, unfortunately I did that here for capital programs, capital projects to help just really provide that clarity, I think overall, towards what these different kind of elements are. If you're looking at capital outlay, which is at the top there, states the acquisition or renewal of a relatively small or inexpensive fiscal assets with a useful life greater than 1 year. And examples commonly include lawnmowers and laptops, and those are commonly handled through really the operating budget discussion overall, so not necessarily aggressive. So with that said, moving on to this next section here, 6.2, the capital improvement plan, really towards the bottom. So if you're playing at home, roughly about page, let's say, pick the next one, page 20, the last paragraph, or the first paragraph on page 20, which is the last paragraph of section 6.2 capital improvement plan. I state here that capital, I've added program or project appropriations are authorized by council at the and struck out fund and as well as added program or project level and review through period project updates and reporting identified in this section. So right now, there's some, as I stated, some complexity involved because we do appropriate our non-utilities capital fund, adding up all the projects for a 2-year period and appropriating for that total amount. So right now you've got, I believe, a non-utility CIP appropriation for the 2-year period of roughly $20 million. In essence, what this says is we need to appropriate at the fund level, but then we also have to appropriate at the project level. And this really is eliminating one in favor of the other. And the other, which is appropriating at the program or project level, will be sustained through continuing appropriations over time. So there's one project budget that will maintain that we don't skew from or elevate necessarily unless there's a budget amendment to that, that will exist for more than just a 2-year period. If you're to set a project budget and we know that project's going to exist for 6 years, for the most part, take us 6 years to complete, that number that you set at that first year is the project budget for that total for that 6 years. Whatever is unused in that project budget after year 1 rolls over into year 2. Whatever is then unused after year 2 rolls over into year 3 and so on when it comes to setting that appropriation. So in essence, we want to kind of achieve that level. We think that this little section right here kind of helps with that overall. There are other cities out there that do continuing appropriations, and so we'll be utilizing them as examples over time, working to identify them. There's not a lot out there, but they do exist, and we're going to be working towards this as a goal, I think, overall, in regards to our capital, the capital portion of our budget.
Councilman Johnson?
Thank you. So let's say it's a 6-year long project, council approves the budget for that project. I'd assume that a later council could go back and say, oh my goodness, this is ballooning. This is gonna cost 20 times what we thought it was, so we're gonna defund the project. I assume that a later council could go back and change that budget at some point. Not like.
I mean, so Mike has more experience.
I would say that the council, any council can defund any project at any time for any reason.
Right.
If the costs were ballooning, obviously it would be brought back to council during an update or a supplemental appropriation, and that opportunity would be created at that time. But for example, Sandy Cove has gone on more than 2 years, but we find ourselves in a place where Dylan and Jenna are having to rework these projects every 2 years for the budget, and we're spending a lot of time and money redoing work and updating with the latest prices. And that may not be the most efficient way of doing things.
Councilman Johnson?
Also, I think it's kind of when I was on the Parks and Public Works Committee, I always thought it was kind of annoying having to figure out, okay, wait a minute. Which budget is this money coming from? Is this part of the overall project thing? Is it something that we need to approve for this amount of time? It was very confusing, I think. And I can only imagine for someone who's not sitting on the council and is a member of the public, it could be even more so. If they're not sitting in meetings going over these things repeatedly. So I could imagine that'd be just simpler in general. For all to understand what the budget is for that project, you just look at one set of numbers.
I mean, as a part of your agenda, Bill, you're often seeing this table presented overall, where we're having to track the life
that.
project budget, but then we're also having to track the budget within the 2-year window, the biennial budget, and it just makes it extremely complicated because we've got a different beginning budget for the life project budget than the biennial budget itself. And so in some cases, those numbers differ quite a bit, and it can make it hard for council to track. So really the goal of moving towards the continuing appropriation process is really, let's eliminate that second column. I think that will make it easier for council to understand over time, help to kind of simplify the process. As Mike stated, they don't have to forecast where they're going to end up by the end of the year and then have to come back in the new year to ask for, appropriation increase or changes overall in order to reflect where we ended up at the end of the previous year and so on. So there's a lot of strain, administrative strain overall by working with a capital project that obviously has a life usually greater than 2 years when we've got the biennial budget is such a bright line process overall. We want to modify that to reflect, the nature of these projects overall. So.
Well, I'm gonna step in, so, because I'm concerned now, guys. I'm hearing that I don't want to continually reestimate these projects. Okay, but I admit it's a lot of work. Okay, but nor do I want to get in the position where I go ahead and authorize a 6-year project and 4 years down the road, I hear, oh my God, it's going to cost 50% more than what we thought. So I don't mind forcing those interim, at least biennial, or at least upon change, review of the project and where they're going to go. Case in point, agenda bill we had last week was a bit weak in that forward-looking discussion. So you're asking me to encourage what I think is a weak thing at this stage, that I really want to encourage that we're having more of those reviews and more of looking at where we think these projects are actually heading at some basis. So let me go to Councilman Johnson and we'll come to you.
Yeah, I was gonna say something very similar in that if we're just saying, okay, so this is gonna be a $50 million project, see in 6 years. That's pretty scary for me, because I mean, what if this thing is now 70 and say a separate administration in the future, not current administration, but a hypothetical administration really wants this project done, and they're just kind of holding that and hoping that nobody notices. And then the last minute, they're gonna say, oh, gee whiz, council, you need to spend an extra $30 million, but we're gonna get this done. You've already invested this much. What are you gonna do? Not saying our current administration would do that, but just saying hypothetically it could happen. I would definitely want
The ex-mayor of Pacifica could come here. Yeah.
So I definitely want to, perhaps depending on the size of the project, let's say if it's above a certain amount, that we would have something built in as, let's make sure that we work the numbers, make sure this is still on track. So we aren't just running blind for 6 years, then all of a sudden, either a surprise or someone's doing something shady, either direction.
City Administrator?
It's Pacific, by the way. You really got me with Pacifica.
No, there's the city, Pacifica.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
It's
but-
Auburn.
Anyway, so please don't understand that I'm asking to do less work. Obviously, Parks Public Works Committee should be regularly checking in on projects and staff should be bringing those reports regularly forward. The real trick with this method is not spending the money more than once. So when you appropriate a chunk of money, you need to block out that money so it doesn't get used again. The way we do a CIP and this is what it feels like in Public Works is, okay, we're gonna do the sewer project. And that project lasted more than 2 years. And it's like, we spent 2 years in planning, we get through the planning, okay, they take all the cards off the table, they reshuffle the deck. Is the project that we just spent 2 years on gonna make the cut on the next thing? And then we got 2 years to race to get it done. And anything like we're seeing at Sandy Cove, Army Corps of Engineers threw a wrench in it, so it's delayed another year. And that just throws in even more uncertainty. But council's still involved in it, in signing contracts and approving contracts and steps and everything else. So it's not like, here's a chunk of money, see you in 6 years, you're not gonna see us anymore. I don't think that's realistic. I think the more danger, the more real danger is making sure we don't spend the money more than once when we're budgeting. That's the trap that most people fall in. I think there's robust reviews, robust opportunities for conversation and presentation. And the town's not big enough to get lost for 6 years in anyway. So
You'd be amazed.
In my estimation, the goal is to reduce work over here so that we can free up more time over here for the activities that you really want us to do, which is really earn value estimates, right? I think overall, which you're not getting a part of the budget statement. Part of the reason why you're not getting the part of that in the budget statement is because we don't just have one column to do. We've got 2 columns to try to figure out continuously. And that means an additional 30 minutes to an hour that Jana has to spend in order to produce this table overall. We want to reduce that complexity so that we can get to some of those numbers. And obviously there's going to be an education process internally with our project engineers, really our project managers overall, to figure out how do we calculate earned value estimates and things like that and provide you with that picture overall. We want to reach that stage, but in order to get there, we need to free up some time here to be able to provide that.
Councilman Johnson?
Yeah, I think that right now what we're doing is we're balancing the wrong budgets for the wrong reasons when it comes to projects. And that's a waste of staff time and it's an unnecessary complication. That said, perhaps one of the things that we could work into the financial policy is something like, let's say it's over a certain threshold, just, I think the phrase is spitballing here, but if it's over a certain threshold, then you have to come back to council with an update on the progress of how on track the budget is at this regular interval, say every 2 years or whatever. Say if it's over $1 million, they have to come back every 6 months. I'm just kind of making stuff up, but you see what I'm saying, right? That we still have this general process. They don't have to actually balance 2 separate budgets artificially that aren't actually helping us account for anything. They're just having to make sure that they're on top of it and that they have some accountability to the public through us.
Right, and I think that'll happen, because like CIP review and continual update on projects. But isn't it a good thing, you mentioned $50 million project. So if it's a $50 million project, so regarding maybe Sandy Cove or something like that, where we spent $2 million. Now, that was the last budget, but maybe it's gonna be 5 million this time. And then next time it's gonna be 7 million. So add all that up, isn't it better to have, here's the total, And now we're gonna follow it through. So you're aware that it's a $50 million project rather than us adding on every 2 years in order to finish the project. So here you have, I think you have actually better cost control by knowing what it's gonna be, and then you're gonna see, oh my gosh, it's more than what you said it was, or whatever, but.
Okay, that's it. City Administrator?
And to be honest with you, I'd like to take it even a step forward, and I would like to get Public Works to the point where your monthly reports have a report card listing all the approved projects and what their status is. Hi, Dylan.
You
But-
go, Dylan.
But we need to get an assistant director over there first so that people have a little more time to do that. But that's what I see in the immediate future.
Councilor Johnson?
But also, again, they'd be balancing the budget for the project, not some artificial every 2 years scrambling to figure out, wait, did we overspend on this by $10? Beyond our spending limit or whatever, you know, yeah. It's that they would be budgeting for the thing that actually matters.
Okay. 7.0 debt management. Moving right along. So 7.2, we've got an update to this section. Basically, it states the city council may authorize the following types of debt financing only for those purposes as provided by chapter 39 of the revised code of Washington. And there's a sub-bullet point there that says issuance of councilmanic. I've added limited tax general obligation bonds for capital projects that are authorized to be supported by the general fund. And then I've also added or capital project funds through the capital improvement plan for debt service requirements. You're going to see this come up within the capital improvement plan itself, but not only can we utilize general fund revenues, but there are other revenue sources that we could utilize to fund our limited tax general obligation bonds, provided the council wants to issue those bonds itself. We don't need to be just necessarily hamstrung to one potential source of revenue, but there are other sources of revenue. And we fully understand that really the city's pledging its full faith and credit to a bond when it does issue one, if it does, for example, but we can choose exactly how we're going to repay that back and what revenue source is tied to it. So with that said, you know, for what you're going to see as a part of the capital improvement plan, certainly REIT is certainly a accessible source or available source to fund debt service over time. And there may be others through capital project funds too that could support debt service. And so it doesn't necessarily just have to be the general fund. So a little bit more flexibility in that regard. The next one after that is section 9.0, long-term financial planning. In essence, this spoke about one financial model. We actually have multiple financial models, and I just wanted to kind of call out those multiple financial models that we have overall. The CIP that you're going to see here shortly is actually really a financial model. It's a financial plan that looks out 6 years, so it's a long-term plan itself. And really, we should be working to address all funds. And you know, I wanted to describe some of those long-term financial models that we produce. Should include a governmental operating financial forecast addressing the general reserve funds, a governmental capital financial plan, which is commonly observed through the 6-year CIP, an enterprise financial plan, which is often presented through the utility rate study, and a 6-year CIP, and an internal cost allocation plan, which addresses the replacement schedule of important assets such as vehicle and software systems. So with that said, that is the last one on the table here, just trying to provide maybe some more clarity about the different financial models and plans that we provide overall. And I'll leave it to any further questions. Otherwise, I will turn it over here for the next item on the agenda.
Any further questions, or we want to take this home and read it to our children and see what they think?
They'll help them go to sleep.
Right.
I've read worse things to my kids. Oh. All right, thank you, Drew. We'll go ahead and I assume the CIP is next?
I believe so. It's a, yeah.
No?
Or- and
Oh, wait a minute.
Police service.
Oh, police services.
What?
Who's gonna talk, North Bend Police Services?
This is me tonight. You'll be hearing from the police chief on Monday night. So I just want to take a few minutes to talk about the current agreement for those of you who may or may not be aware of the setup. It is a flat fee contract. Back in 2019, when this current 5-year chunk was signed, it started at 1.8 million and some change. And this year it is 2.4 million and some change. The coverage required is at least one officer on duty within city limits, 24/365, and that's North Bend city limits. And it provides for staffing of 8 officers, 2 sergeants, 1 records clerk, and 50% of a school resource officer. We're going to come back to that in a little bit. It requires police services and associated duties. So basically police stuff, investigations, special events, coverage, all that police stuff. And the term may be extended on mutual agreement. And currently the contract dated to expire on December 31st of this year, unless it's terminated according to the way you terminate things. Also in that section, it is this clause, and that's an automatic renewal. And it says that if this renewal agreement is not terminated during the term as described, it will automatically renew for 1 or more additional 5-year periods based upon the same terms and conditions set forth in this renewal agreement, except for adjustment of the annual fee or otherwise amended by mutual agreement of the parties. And the fee formula for any renewal term shall be negotiated as in section 5. So if we do nothing in January, this thing renews for another 5 years. Termination, either party can terminate the agreement at any time. The key point is once that termination decision is made, the contract runs for another 18 months. And during that 18-month period, when the price should go up for an annual increase, it's limited at 5%. So for example, if it was terminated today, not suggesting it is, but if it was terminated today, the annual for 2025 would be 2.5 million and some change. That's how that 5% plays in. What's unique in this contract that I've never seen before, not that I've seen a lot of contracts, but I kind of have seen a lot of contracts, is the renewal terms were pre-negotiated. The assumptions were that the staffing levels would remain the same and that they would compensate the city of Snoqualmie for 12% of the chief and captain positions. Just to note that Snoqualmie's population is about 65% compared to North Bend's 35%. Each city pays their own dispatch services, which is not occurring now because it's covered under that flat fee. There would be an establishment of an ER&R fund to care for the North Bend police vehicles. They do own 4 police vehicles that we operate. Field repair and insurance costs, and it would also cover office overhead. Now, the contract goes on to say that North Bend's contribution for office overhead will be to provide space in North Bend City Hall for an officer to work. And the other clause is that Snoqualmie would be fully compensated. So we're sharing the costs evenly. One city is not an advantage or a disadvantage, etc. So North Bend, they're in the process of contracting with a consultant to conduct a feasibility study to stand up their own police force. At a meeting last month, they appropriated $60,000 to complete this work, and it's expected to take up to a year. And we were verbally asked to extend this agreement for an additional year. Thinking about it and doing some analysis, the following things immediately jump to my mind. This will create uncertainty in our next biennial budget process because we don't know if the contract's going to run for the full amount of the budget. Failing to renew the contract, if we extend it for 1 year, will require significant budget and staffing revisions during that biennial budget. It also would continue an estimated imbalance of compensation for another year of approximately $1 million. Finance Department recently did a recalculation of what the 2025 amount should be. We did change 3 factors. We did base it upon population, so it was more 35% of the police chief and 35% of the captain because of population, but it also included half the cost of the detective and half the cost of the administrative sergeant, which did not exist when the contract was drafted 5 years ago. And that actually projects the actual cost up to 3.5 million for 2025. So the question that we need direction on Monday, not tonight, this is just bringing up to speed and planting seeds, is do we counter based upon those numbers that we've currently calculated? I'm recommending that we add a true up clause to the contract. And what that means is that it would balance the account out annually. Finance says in March of each year, they can tell us what the actual costs were to provide services to North Bend. And what I'm suggesting is that if those actual costs are less than these numbers here, we would refund the difference. Or if the actual costs exceeded these numbers here, North Bend would commit to paying us the difference. So we were on that even Steven level, and no longer would there be a financial imbalance between the two cities regarding this contract. Go. So.
So if, okay, if, we just say that we accepted 1 year thing, all right? Would that mean that, at the end of, December of 2025, they could essentially immediately stop the contract, or would that be saying that after that, they would get another 18 months?
Any time within that year,
Mhm.
they could decide we are no longer going to continue, and it would trigger the 18-month clause.
The 18 months clause would effectively still be in place.
Correct.
Okay.
So why not counter with a 2-year extension? Their study's gonna take a year.
Yeah,
Termination requires a year and a half. So you're 2.5 years out before you can actually terminate based on the consultant feedback.
we're open for any suggestion and
That relieves your issue, at least our issue on the biennial mismatch.
Correct.
Karen, did you have your hand up?
So I guess just then, so assuming that we did go forward with offering a 2-year extension, then would we be getting it at the higher price point, or would it just be an extension of what we're doing now, which is where we are supplementing for the discrepancy between what it is costing us to provide police services and what they're paying us?
I can't answer that question. As if we just offered them a 2-year extension, it would be at the continued flat fee pricing. My recommendation would be that if we did agree to a 2-year extension, that we trigger the reopener for balancing out the payment and negotiate those new fees. I don't know how successful those negotiations would be because they're like any negotiation.
Councilman Johnson?
Could be a starting point, though. They counter. Meet in the middle somewhere.
Mayor?
So when they mentioned they might be interested in 1-year extension, I did mention that if we do that, we want to make sure we cover all of our costs. So I don't know if it'd be the 3.5 million or what it's going to be. That's what the costs are, right? But
Currently, we are providing detective services to them and that they are not covered by this contract, and we are providing the admin sergeant services to them. And they are not being covered by this contract, and they are only compensating us for 12% of the chief and the captain.
and they're not paying their fair share of overtime.
But there is mutual benefit between the two cities of having this contract in place.
Agree.
There is, just, is it worth the price differential? Right?
And one of our difficulties. Go ahead.
I was just gonna offer, we're talking.
You gotta go to a microphone.
Right.
Way over there.
It's really another fourth element to this picture overall is the overhead portion of this. So when we talk about IT, for example, they're not compensating us for IT services, even though we've got Andy and Jimmy that have to run out to those vehicles and service the vehicles and their spillman equipment. The amount of time that Mike, myself, Janet, for example, have to spend on the Northland contract is, there's a portion of our time that is devoted to this. If you look at the payroll that we constantly produce, they're roughly about 1/10 of our total employees at the city overall. That is a significant service that we're providing that we aren't necessarily compensated for. And so that's another element of the 3.5 that you saw as part of that picture.
And one of our difficulties, and feel free to jump in if I say this wrong, Drew, because you're the one who told me this. Okay, I threw you under the bus, sorry. But in the past, apparently it was a decision not to track the actual costs of the North Bend contract and to just appropriate the amount of the contract, and any excess that was spent out of the Snoqualmie funds. So it's really hard for us to get a complete picture at this date for the last 5 years of what the true costs really were. For example, last year, City of Snoqualmie had a $250,000 overtime cost for police, and North Bend had $10,000. I think there's a problem.
Councilman Jones.
This gets to the 12% versus 35%. Is my memory right that North Bend did annexations and expanded their population over the last few years?
There certainly is a lot of housing development that is now taking place and has taken place over the past 5 years. Certainly, there probably has been annexations into the city of North Bend.
The
And-
point being that it didn't start off with that population difference of them being 35% of the area covered. I don't know if it was as low as 12, but just point being, when this was put in place, the contract originally, the number wasn't that far off.
The original contract, I believe, cited 10%. That 10% increased to 12% upon the renegotiation of that contract. I'm not sure the reason why it jumped from 10 to 12 overall, or what difference that 2%
There was-
in lieu of, but yeah.
There was some assumption. I don't know if you can divide the chief's time based on the populations, or should it be based on the calls, or should it be based on the officers? What's the split between North Bend and Snoqualmie officers? So there are some assumptions that go into that split. We do not have staff currently recording their time of here's my Snoqualmie hours, here's my North Bend hours, and doing a true roll-up, my assumption. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Staff is supposed to be recording hours according to that, but that in practice has not been what is happening. Staff has been assigned home accounts in the 2 different accounts. And no matter where they work, whatever overtime shift they're covering, it looks like things have been charged to those home accounts.
Right.
You're correct. There's many, many different ways to split the onion on whether it's population, number of officers, number of calls, etc. Population is a standard way to do it, so that's why I'm throwing it out as a suggestion.
Yeah, I just don't remember how the 12% was assumed. I assume there was some logic in there. And we do, I mean, if we had 3 zebras running around, we may pull the North Bend officer over here to help us get them, and vice versa. So I mean, there is some benefit what we are getting from the contract. of that available resource potentially when we need them that is not accounted for here either. So, I mean, no matter how you slice this, it's going to be imperfect.
Right, so often we're talking about costs when really we're interested in the return on the investment. I think overall what that difference is between the benefit that we're receiving and the cost overall, and we'll certainly need council's help as well as the administration to kind of help sift that.
I'm not looking for return on investment. I'm
Well,
looking for delivery service at cost to them.
Mhm.
That's fair to us, and we have a joint resource together. Councilman Johnson, then I'll get back to you.
$1 million, if that's the right number, seems like a lot. It feels generous.
That's why I'm suggesting that true up clause, because that really does institute fairness in the contract for both cities. No one's going to benefit or lose once that is in place. Currently, without it, this contract does set up a situation where you have a winner and a loser.
Right, and but we should also work to get those into the contract or advise them, okay, if you don't want detective services when you need them, you're gonna have to contract back to the Association of Small Cities or whatever, to bring that in as mutual aid or something or other, but, we should get those up front and do a true up at the end, both ways. Holloway's opinion. So what direction what's your question tonight, young man?
I have no questions tonight. I'm providing information for you to chew on for a week. The question's going to come on Monday night for the chief, seeking direction on how you would like to us to respond to North Bend,
And the options are,
whatever you want.
well, no, the options are to invoke the extension clause,
Counter with,
counter with
A
some
new
of these
contract?
additional costs that we think are in there. And is it 1 year, 2 years, or do we do the 5 years, which contract specifies? Even with the 5 year, it still requires the 18-year or 18-month notice for termination.
correct.
So I mean, it's almost functionally equivalent to a 2 year extension anyway. Yeah. Is that it? That was fun.
Sorry.
Where are we? Not there. Okay, I'm gonna hold that conversation come council. I'm gonna talk to a couple of people. I'm gonna see if I can get myself and 2 other council members together to do an ad hoc off to the side discussion of what goes on here. And propose something come council. Maybe getting together Wednesday night to try to lay this all out, figure out what we want to really do. Councilman Jones.
Yeah, I think that having to wait the 2 weeks to get back to FNA could hamper the process. I think that's a good call.
Yeah, it's. And then, introduction of mayor's proposed 2025-2030 CIP. I think we all have reading material.
Good evening, FNA and Mayor. Dylan Gamble still, and I realize I'm gonna be a bit of a broken record if I repeat everything. I know that we have a change up from when Public Works heard this material the first time. So before I jump in and repeat everything, do you want me to go about repeating all that again and or
You
reading through
got
it?
2 to count. How much of the conversation in public work?
I was there for all of it.
I was not. Sorry.
That's okay.
I can go back and listen to it though.
No,
I'm
I
happy
can
to.
go fast.
Go fast.
Okay, I can go fast.
Compromise, go fast.
You did it in 4 minutes, didn't you?
Yeah,
Oh, so if it was just that.
Yeah.
it was
Oh,
just that,
then
but you
yes,
didn't have the
I was
sheets in
here
front
for
of
that.
you.
That's
So
true.
Okay.
But I did review them at home.
Okay, great.
So
Well, generally speaking, there's 3 documents in front of you. They are reflective of us trying to move into the new biennium with a new CIP. And those documents have a lot of changes, obviously. As we go from the 23 to 28 to now, we're looking at how do we broadcast further in the future, an additional 2 years as we've traveled through time. In addition to that, we have new projects and programs and they time and cost different things. And so what we've tried to do is be cognizant of council priorities. And we have also tried to match up the priorities that are listed in different formats. In this case, we'll have programs that are attached to those council priorities, as well as projects. And so we've tried to make the new proposal capture all those elements, us moving into the future with a realistic, or I should say, a level of service matching effort, as well as trying to true costs as best we can, especially in the near 2 years, the first 2 years of the proposed CIP, to best reflect our anticipated costs for projects and for our programs if they differ from previous bienniums. I gave you a cheat sheet, as I like to call it. This is that changes from the former CIP to this one. That tries to capture a lot of the moving parts and what has changed. I have seen, I cannot tell you how many variations of this as we have worked through it to try to make sure that all the restricted funds have the right revenues to match the expenditures, and that we're trying to time the projects based on feasibility of them sometimes, and trying to make sure that the programmatic efforts maintain at the level of service that we've indicated. And we actually have some suggestions to decrease some programs to better reflect what we've been doing and increase others to reflect what we think is ideal given the councilmanic goals and priorities. So there is a lot to unpack in a document like this. It really is looking at a lot of our fun and exciting projects, as well as how we maintain all of our infrastructure in terms of parks and transportation and on our facilities, and included in here is some IT as well. And so there's a lot to unpack in that. And I am realizing I'm kind of about to start repeating the same things I've said before. So I want to leave a bit of room to see if there's any questions on how it's structured. Maybe if you feel like there's something missing, if I can maybe help point it to you. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page about kind of what documents I brought and how they pair up to as time. And I suppose one last thing I want to mention is I have a feeling one thing you're going to be asking about is where is this 384th project, right, on this document? I didn't see it anywhere. And the answer is some of these projects that have transportation elements are actually funded through our utility. And so they're going to come as part of the utility rates to figure out the revenue, and they'll come as part of the utility rate study as part of the what costs all of that money to charge rates for. So as much as they seem really close, they're divided. And so we will be bringing that later on. In this, for just this one, we're really looking at those transportation projects, parks and open space projects, facility projects. We have the community centers in there, of course, and then IT projects. The revenues that kind of match up with that are all found on the first page at the top here. And it's broken out by year. And we have, in the background of this document, looked at all the restricted funds, specifically things like the transportation. There's like a several buckets of funds that are restricted revenue for transportation infrastructure. We have them color coded in blue. And we tried to match those expenditures in blue as well. And we have something similar that happens for parks and open spaces, that's green. And we tried to match the programs and projects that can use a restricted fund like that in green as well. Lastly, there's some, the community centers included in here. So there's a approach to that is very well broken out in the worksheet, which is what we're kind of looking at right here. I call these worksheets or one-pagers. They're essentially the project or program specific breakdown of both revenue, timing, an anticipated balancing of when we're going to spend and on what and in what years, and then the revenue at the bottom to try to showcase where we're anticipating the revenue or how we're breaking it apart. There's going to be lots to unpack here, but generally speaking, we did not vary too far from a great product that we had from the 23 to 28 CIP. We tried to really build on our what was made in the past. It performed well as we've been going through these last 2 years. And so we tried to track it and update it, reflect as much as we can with the new information that we have since then, and kind of keep that same tone and intent. So I know I've gone quite a ways there, but I'll actually pause.
And my favorite part is at the back where you see all the completed projects.
I'll scroll. Don't look at that screen. It's gonna. So here's that's what he was talking about, the back projects.
Councilman Johnson?
Definitely too early to get too far into the weeds, but I like the number on the community center expansion project. I hope that's the right number.
It is the right number.
Better than last time I saw it.
This is as updated as I have.
A lot of work went into getting that number.
I believe it.
I have some questions, but I can ask you later.
Lots of weeds.
Yeah, it's homework. And we'll feed questions to you as we have them.
Absolutely. You can send them to me. If it's really revenue specific, make sure you CC Jana. My
I-
counterpart, and I should say that a lot of the work on this was done by Jana as well. It's not just me. I just make things really complicated and hard and make her do it twice and things like that. That's what happens when you try to guesstimate project costs. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that Jana's a major component of this.
So one broad question though, I see you've used 13.92% inflation rate. How was that number derived?
Yes, so we took the difference between 2022 numbers to now. That's the span that we're looking at. We specifically used the ENR, or the engineers something of record, engineers news record. That number is essentially the construction cost index. It's an inflationary index. It's the same exact one we use for calculating GFC inflations year to year. So when we charge general facilities charges to our to any new developers and they're paying into the utility, we increase that rate every year automatically by the engineer's news record inflationary number. So I took that number, which turned into 17.92%, I think, or something very close to that. And I reduced it by the assumed inflation that we had always anticipated in the world. It just did not meet the 17% that we actually collected over the years between 2022 and now. So essentially what I'm trying to do is bring all of our numbers into the realistic constructability. And I took it down by 3.5% as a bit of trying to be as reflective of a good number as possible. That's how I got to those numbers. Took 17 down by 3.5 because we were always assuming inflation from the previous numbers.
Cool. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. Any other questions or more reading of things to your children? Thanks very much.
At least it has pictures this time.
With that, I think let's go ahead and review the upcoming council agenda. As soon as I can get to it, it's just better just to go to the bottom and work my way up. All right, so we'll have a workshop, a roundtable at 6 p.m. Talking comprehensive plan, environmental element. I think it's similar to what we've had before. Regular agenda starting at 7, call to order, pledge of allegiance, agenda approval, public hearing, presentation, proclamations, appointments. Again, we'll have the introduction of mayor's proposed 2025-2030 utilities. Are we going to have a discussion of irrigation at council? And should that be right after the same one, after the CIP, have a brief proposal or brief show what you showed for the public works?
I have it under committee reports.
You have it under committee reports? Okay. I didn't see it.
No, I mean, I added it
Oh,
after,
you, okay, you've already captured it.
but I
uh,
can move it to presentations if you would rather.
I don't mind it after committee reports on. It's good. All right, and then we'll have proclamation of affordable housing, National Police Week. Consent agenda, approve the city council meeting minutes and the claims report. That's all we had. We will have an ordinance of misuse of 911 response system. And I believe that's a public safety for introduction there.
Best second reading is,
Yeah, is who's gonna read?
uh, Chief, public safety. that
It'll
would
be Watton, Councilman Watton. All right, and we'll get in committee reports, public safety community development committee, emergency housing draft code amendment and motion on economic development element.
So
We'll
I-
move, oh,
I believe that number 8 actually needs to be moved up to number
Oh, that's right.
ordinances.
It's a code change.
is it a code change?
So that'll be moved as a first reading.
Okay, that'll be moved under number 7 up above on our ordinances. Okay. Parks and Public Works Committee.
So we're adding the 3 items from tonight.
Yeah, we had at least one non-consent item.
There was the Meadowbrook Bridge and then the King Street closure and the reclaiming water.
Yep, thank you. All right, then we'll move the F and A. We'll have the same discussion in regards to North Bend Police Contract Services. And then Committee of the Whole. And then Mayor's Report, Commission Committee Layout Report, Department Liaisons, Executive Sessions. And closed session held there and move to adjournment. Did I miss anything, other revisions we need to make?
I don't.
All right,
We may not need number 5, the closed session, but we can leave it there, just in case.
good to have it in case you need it.
Right.
All right, so with those revisions, we're good to go. Except and we'll move that forward to council. Some closing out business in 2 weeks. I'm not gonna call in. I'm gonna be on vacation. Can you chair F and A in 2 weeks?
It's not Memorial. It's Memorial Day, not.
It'd be the 21st.
I'm also out of town.
Hmm?
Wait, the 21st?
Yeah,
No, I
21st.
can do that.
And then Joe, if I'll do my talk right now, if I can get you to help me on the council open house discussion, I'd like to pull you and one other.
Okay.
To have that discussion. Okay, any other items for discussion before committee? All right, if not, unless there are objections, I'll adjourn us.
Right.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.